Hey, Evan.
Hey,
Welcome.
how are you all?
Hi, Evan. Welcome.
Hey.
Welcome to our Invention Boot Camp. It's been great to talk to you before about this, and it's great to have you in our little virtual space here.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah. Evan works in the School of Business. He's the Diversity Outreach Retention Recruitment Coordinator there, and he runs the Summer Business Institute for high school students. So we first met a couple maybe months ago talking about how the heck do we do summer camps if we can't get together? So anyway, um, I've asked Evan to come and talk about his experience, both inside the school of business, but also his path to college or how he views that whole experience. And I'm going to stop talking and give you the virtual mic here.
I was just going to say really quickly, the students, if you activate your speaker view, you get a better feeling like you're actually in the room with Evan while he's talking rather than seeing all those little tiny squares. Anyway, take it away. Thank you, Evan, for joining us. We're thrilled to have you.
You got your whole team there. I like that. I like that.
Yes.
All right. Working from home, guys. This is what
That's
life
the
is
team.
So thank you guys for having me. I appreciate being invited in to chat with you all. Hopefully you'll leave with something meaningful, and please feel free to ask as many questions as you like. Can everyone hear me? I guess that's the first question. Yeah? Cool. Great. So as was mentioned, my name's Evan Green. I work in the School of Business here at Portland State University. My formal title, and I guess titles matter but don't at the same time, is Assistant Director of Diversity and Equity Outreach. And essentially for me, what that means is I have an opportunity through my job, I think, to really support students to achieving the goals that they've set for themselves, whether they realize they've set those or not. And for me, that's kind of been a lifelong passion, and the fact that I've always kind of wanted to have a career that allowed me to, I think, give back in a way that will meaningfully support kind of selfishly myself, but kind of in a more global perspective, my communities and the communities in which I spend the most time in. So through this role, and actually through my past roles, I've really been fortunate enough to, I think, help shepherd students to their goals, because in my belief, when students achieve their goals and end up in the corporations and the companies and the businesses that they want to be in, I think they bring in a degree, a lens of their experiences, and through that lens, I think that they can help to kind of push very organically and from a grassroots point of view, kind of inclusion and equity and things of that nature. So that's kind of what my passion and dream has been. And I've been lucky enough to be able to make a couple bucks doing it, which is always nice. I am a person who's originally from the East Coast, so Oregon has been my first experience on the West Coast, and it's been lovely so far overall. But it's been a change. It's been different. But I grew up in Western New York. I know a lot of people here in New York and think it's probably like the state of Oregon in a lot of ways. When people think of Oregon, they think of Portland, but there's Bend, there's Eugene, there's Medford, there's other parts of Oregon. So I'm kind of one of those people who's from the other part of New York State. So the city I grew up in is about 6 hours west of New York City. So I kind of joke with people that my closest major city was Toronto, Canada, as opposed to New York City, and I lived in New York State. So gotta love geography in that way. But again, spent my life there, grew up, went to college in Virginia, spent some time in Virginia, came back to New York, and then realized that, I needed to go to grad school. So I went to Buffalo. I went further west in the state, and then realized that I wanted to come back home again. So I came back home again, and then went off to DC. And then as I was in DC, kind of feeling like, I love DC, but I want to live somewhere else at this point. Why not try the West Coast? And I'm not like an Oregonian who hates California, but never been a big fan of California. So it was like, if I move west, it definitely is going to be the Pacific Northwest, and ended up in Portland. So I'm really happy to be here. That's kind of how I got here. One question, I guess, to kick it off with that was kind of given to me was, what advice would I have given to myself if I was your age now? And I think the big thing is really to just listen and to follow your feet, and to never necessarily feel like you know more than you do, if that makes sense. I think it's great that we know what we know, and I think it's great to be kind of stubborn and focused at times, but always be willing and open to listen, because you just never know who's going to give you the gem that you kind of need. Prior to coming to Portland, I had a lot of conversations. People like to talk to me. I don't know what it is about my face, but people want to chit chat with me randomly. So I would be walking down the street and have a lot of random conversations with a lot of people that at times you may look at and be like, I don't think I want to talk to you. But some of the best information I've gotten in this life has come from those kind of one-off conversations. So it's important to listen, whether or not you need that information in that moment. Hearing it and absorbing it, it'll come back when you do need it. So I think my biggest advice would be really listen. And kind of a caveat to that, and something we talked about yesterday, was just confidence. I know what it's like. I truly know what it's like, even at my advanced age, what it's like to not feel confident, or what it's like to feel like, I probably won't get it. Like, maybe I should apply, maybe I shouldn't, I'm probably not going to get in, never mind. Or should I apply for this job? No, I'll just go for the one that's easier, that I know that I'm going to get, and it'll be fine, as opposed to challenging ourselves. So what I would just say to you all is to be confident. You guys are worth it. You deserve. There's no reason why, if you academically have the grades, why you can't go to Harvard, or why you can't go anywhere, right? Or why you can't, be the next, Phil Knight or whatever. There's no reason, and I know those are like big things, but the bottom line is you have to see yourself in that space for you to be able to get into that space. So I think the first step of seeing yourself is to be confident. So that's kind of an introduction of me. I think that we're going to have kind of an impromptu conversation. So please, as questions arise, ask me. I'm not managing the chat box, but it looks like there's a lot of chats. You guys talking about me? No, you're just talking. Cool.
This is great. Thanks again. You talked yesterday, we had a little chat about, you described yourself as having a traditional experience with college, and how you view that just more like so this notion of intergenerational opportunity. You want to talk about that a little bit? It was a lot of really great ideas.
Sure. So I think I'll start by saying that I think a lot of times, just by virtue of the world we live in, right? Like, you look at me, and I'm a black male, believe it or not, in case you didn't know this. And I think sometimes there is a stigma and a baggage associated with being a black male in America / just a POC in America, and what that looks like. And as we were talking yesterday, I kind of just explained that, like, I kind of am not the stereotype in a lot of ways, right? Like, I'm lucky enough, and luck is, I think, has a lot to do with it, but fortunate enough to have come from an environment where I grew up in a predominantly white community in a suburb outside of our major city, right? Which was great. I had a great childhood. I learned about race really early, probably earlier than a lot of people because of it, but it is what it is. And I had a lot of good, interactions and relationships and friendships growing up. But something that I just always knew was I was going to college. Like, whether, I don't know, even as a 12-year-old or a 10-year-old looking at college basketball, I always just kind of knew I would be on somebody's college campus. And again, I'm lucky for that. But I'm lucky because, and to the point, I think every family has a journey, right? And your journey is your journey. It's your family's journey. It's from the time that you either started in this country or started wherever you were at till this point. And I think we all have an obligation, right? Like, I have an obligation to my parents and my parents' parents, right? And their parents' parents. And the obligation in my mind is to just run the race a little bit further than the group before me ran the race, right? So again, fortunate enough that my mom, my dad, and my brother all had master's degrees, right? So I kind of just knew eventually I was going to have a master's degree because everyone else did. But that, again, for me was more about, okay, that's the foundation. That's just the baseline for our family at this point. So I have to at least get there. And then the question becomes, how do I extend it? How do I move our kind of family legacy forward, right? I know we live in a world where it's like, everybody's included, but I think our family and our family legacy is really, really important, and that all you can do in this life is do the best you can for yourself and your family, right? Like, and when you do that, I think everything else kind of, snowballs downhill from there. So I was kind of explaining that I think it's a passing of the baton, right? So my parents passed the baton to me. I will eventually pass the baton to my children or my child. And for example, I started working on a PhD because I was like, well, everyone else has a master's. I'd like to kind of start a legacy in our family where not only do you get a master's, but it's kind of almost expected that you'll get a PhD as well, right? So again, I think people are at different points in their journey, but there's nothing wrong with starting that journey, right? So at some point in our family history, someone was a first-generation college student, right? And now, years down the line, everyone's got a master's, right? So I think it's starting that legacy within your family. If you happen to be first gen, that's fine. Just know that as a first-generation college student, you're going to experience a lot of just hardships. And it's not because, in hardships, I know the word sounds negative, but it's not meant to be negative. It's because the learning curve is different, there's just going to be different aspects that you're going to have to overcome and deal with, right? But being in a program like this, I think it's the start, right? It's your ability to create a network and a support system that's been through it that can kind of help you along the way. I remember early on when I started my academic, working in higher ed, I was meeting with a student and he was like, yeah, I'm working on an engineering degree. I'm a freshman. It's really overwhelming right now. I'm originally from the Bronx, New York. I'm in Rochester, New York now, 8 hours away from my family. And he's like, I still get phone calls from home to help translate when, my family members go to different meetings and appointments and things like that. And it's really, really stressful trying to kind of juggle everything. And I was like, wow, I fully understand. But part of that is just kind of part of the game. Like, how do you now, because I think you still have to be that support system for home. Like, unfortunately, I'm not going to be the one to say don't support home. You still have to, I think, support home. But how do you do that in a way where you're still feeling supported? You're still feeling fulfilled, right? You're not feeling like this is an extra kind of burden in your life, and kind of talking through some of those things. So again, this is very specific, I think, to a first-generation college student who's probably first-generation in America too. So that's slightly different, but at the same time, I think there's some complexities of that experience and of being, I think, made whole that are really, really important. Yeah.
B has a question.
Yeah, my question is, what thoughts do you think really amplified the mindset of I'm going to go to college and I'm going to succeed, and I know that like I have confidence and I know that I will do well, or I know that I will make my family into a better legacy or whatever? Like, what mindset and thoughts?
So I wish I could tell you that it was a formalized mindset. It was faking it until I make it. It was a situation where my parent was like, you're going to college or you can go to the military. And I was like, as I told him yesterday, this was a time when going to the military meant you may go to Korea and kind of sit on a wall and not really have a whole lot of interactions, or you might get sent to Cuba and kind of, this is pre-Guantanamo being a prison. You know, you might go out to Guantanamo and kind of be there, and it was really, I think, a safe, kind of cushy military existence back then. But I don't know, the mindset was just, I'm not built for anybody's war. And as much as high school was super hard and I didn't like it, I just kind of knew that I just had to do another 4 years, because more than anything, and I know money is not the major driver, I just knew that, again, the benefit of growing up in a space that's somewhat affluent, right? I just kind of looked around and was like, I like living like this. You know what I mean? And if college means if that's something I have to do to make this happen, then I'll get through. And I think what's really interesting, part of like demystifying college is it's not that hard. I know it's easy for me to say that, but as long as it's probably harder to graduate because of the social and the environmental things that take place, but the actual coursework, as long as you read the book, come to class, you know, and when you have problems, you ask for help, you're gonna be, you know, you're gonna be fine. You're gonna graduate. You might not graduate with you may
So
not
sorry.
you know what I mean? Which I think is really, really important. So it's hard for me to say what that motivation was, but it was a lot of faking it, right? It was a lot of just, you know, I was telling the group yesterday that everybody in my family went to a historically Black college, right? So it was more like, am I going to go to a historically Black college, or am I going to go to a predominantly white institution? Was kind of more of the thing. And because, again, I think tours and things like this totally help. Any opportunity you have to set foot on a college campus, go do it. Because for me, I had spent 2 of my spring breaks going on historically Black college tours, right? So for a week, we got on a bus, 40 other students from across the city, and we drove down south, right? And we started hitting all these college campuses. And as much as many of them I saw, I was like, I'm not going here. Just to be there and to see it and to be around other people who were talking about going to college, let me know that, one, I was going to get in somewhere, and that getting in somewhere was going to kind of relate into me probably graduating. Again, but luckily didn't have some of the financial barriers that people have to, you know, to actually getting through college. But that's why I say some of the other things are more the barriers that are going to potentially prevent you from graduating in the timely fashion that you want to, more so than the workload itself being too difficult. Do you feel like I answered your question? Cool. Other questions?
There's one that I posted in the chat, and it was there a really big motivator besides like family?
Yes-ish. So family was a motivator too, because I needed to get out of the house. I don't know how some of you all feel, but like, I love my parents. I love my mother. She's wonderful. But by the senior year in high school, I was ready for some space. She needed to be in her space in New York State, and I needed to be in my space in Virginia, and we didn't need to meet except for on breaks, right? So part of the motivator was that too. Really, I will tell people all the time that I have a wanderlust of sorts. I really want to explore. I really want to kind of experience new things. And college for me was an opportunity to truly get out of the house and explore, get out of New York State. Again, I didn't grow up in New York City, so growing up in New York State for me was like, this is a small town and I hate it, and how do I get out of here? You know, and college was that easiest first way for me to take that first step to venture out of the nest. And I got to tell you, to go 10 hours from home to college, like driving, you learn quickly how things change, how the state of Virginia is completely different than the state of New York, how people are different, and you have to learn how to kind of take people's personalities and cultures for what they are. Like, it was a trial by fire. I will tell you too that I spent my first month in college in my dorm room. I went out to go to class, and then I went back to my dorm room just because I just didn't feel comfortable. I I thought I was going to transfer. I really did, if I'm being completely honest. But I didn't, and I made it. But it was a lot. As much as I wanted to explore, it was a lot to learn early on, because you're losing all your comfort zone, right? You're losing all the things that you feel normal in your support structure. Someone like me, I didn't have anyone I knew from high school that went to college with me, which was crazy because I had other friends who were like, oh, we've been good. My roommate came from New York City, and he had there was 20 of them that came from the same high school, and they were all together, and they didn't really talk to each other during high school, but now they were here together from New York, and they were able to kind of quickly create a bond that I was always a little bit jealous of.
Two questions. I'm from Western New York State too.
There you go.
I'm a little curious. Who goes first? You, me. I'm from Perkinsville. You've got to heard of yeah. Four stop signs and a post office, about an hour south of Rochester.
Really? I pride myself on knowing this. I've been to a lot of small towns in the state of New York. I have not been there. You said an hour south, so going towards Hornell?
Yeah, between Hornell's a little west, but yeah, Hornell's over on 17, 390. You would go down through Geneseo.
Out that way?
Yeah, Cohocton, definitely. Yeah, Cohocton's next. Cohocton School got merged with our high school after I left.
Oh, nice. We used to have the state track tournament, or the state qualifier. The qualifier for the state track tournament was at Hornell, because they had a nice little track and AstroTurf field and everything.
Yeah, that was big. That was a big town. We'd go there to get beaten by our other teams. Oh, it's great. It's great. So Rochester, or what?
Yeah, I'm originally from Rochester. I grew up in a suburb outside of Rochester called Penfield, but we just call it Rochester.
Yeah. Another place we'd go to be beaten by other teams.
Definitely not my high school. We were never very good at sports. We were great at volleyball. That was it.
Yeah. Great. So, sort of building on what you were saying before about your experience when you arrived at college, and yesterday we were chatting, and it was in this context of how your choices can shape yourself, and then you mentioned about living in your world and then stepping into the world beyond your experience, which seemed to relate a little bit to your arrival at Virginia, that how you had to step outside your prior comfort or your prior knowledge of the world.
Yeah, I mean, it was a culture shock. And I would argue for anyone, regardless of where you go, and I would probably argue that on the flip side, for those of you who are POCs that are going to go to a predominantly white institution, I think there will be a similar sort of culture shock for you. My culture shock was I didn't grow up in a predominantly Black community. So to go to college and then be in a completely Black community was a culture shock. It was, I had to learn. I didn't know that we had issues within our community. It was just kind of one of these things that I was very, very naive to. So I sounded different. So I got picked on a lot for sounding different. I got told that I wasn't from New York by New Yorkers because their geography was poor. It had nothing to do with me and had everything to do with the fact that they just didn't understand that the state was beyond the 5 boroughs, right? I'm sure they probably conceptualized that the capital was in Albany, but just didn't get that you could be a New Yorker and not from New York City. So I got a lot of pushback because of that. And it forced me to, I guess, become comfortable in my own skin and realize that the things that people are saying are not necessarily who I am, and that I needed to kind of be who I was and show people what that was. But I will say that college is the greatest opportunity for you to, and I think every time you kind of do something groundbreaking and milestone in your life, you get a chance to kind of reinvent yourself. So college for me was that opportunity to truly reinvent myself and to figure out who Evan Green was, right? I, in high school, played sports, so I guess I thought I was an athlete. I wasn't really great at them, but I played them. So I thought I was an athlete, jock person, but the truth is that's not necessarily who I was. Like, it was a part of me, but it took for me to go to college and be around people that were talking about traveling, that were talking about cultural differences, that were talking about kind of how, as I kind of fit in the larger world as a Black male, right? Like, those sorts of experiences, hearing that knowledge helped me to shape the person I am today, and helped me to really, I think, lean into not necessarily feeling like I had to be like everyone else, if that makes sense.
Jerry, we had a student question in the chat.
I have to scroll. Oh yeah.
Iris was asking Evan, what if you want to go beyond and not do college? What would you say to that?
So, Iris, I respect that question, because bottom line is college is not necessarily for everyone, as much as we try to force people to believe that college is for everyone. That said, I think you have to, Iris, you have to ask yourself a very serious question. You have to say, self, if I'm not going to do college, what am I going to do, and how am I going to make a life and a living out of this thing that is not college? Because as much as I don't necessarily believe you have to go to college to be successful, right now, the only established path, potentially, that's kind of spelled out and laid out for people is a college path. And I think that, you know, we could have a philosophical argument on that and how society values education and that sort of thing. Like, I think there's space for that discussion. But in the absence of that, you just have to, again, it's like me deciding I'm not going to go to the military. You have to make the decision that I'm not going to go to college, but I'm going to do this thing. And this thing is going to result in me getting to the ultimate place that I want to get to, right? But I think because it's a non-linear or a non-transparent path, you'll have to work extra hard to make sure you're creating a genuine path to where you want to be. So entrepreneurship, I think, is wonderful, right? Like, so if it's, you know, I want to start my own business, I think that's great. And you have to, if you're not going to college, you have to be, how do I create a business plan? Can I get a certificate in that? What impact will my business have on the market? How do I market it? How do I do it? Like, learning the different ins and outs of what's going to make that business successful. And then, you know, like, I did junior achievement as a little kid. And one thing that I always take away from junior achievement was we had to sell lollipops so we could make enough money, so we could sell t-shirts, so that we could make enough money, so we could sell our real idea, right? So I think that concept for me in business is, if you don't have a ton of money and resources to just do the thing, you're going to have to kind of progressively build into the resources. And I would argue it's kind of like going professional in a sport, right? I would say, as much as you want to go professional in football or basketball or soccer or whatever it may be, it's always nice to have that degree to fall back on, so that if for some reason it doesn't work out, you have another kind of foundation that you can pivot to that's also going to provide resources. So I wouldn't discourage you from not going to college, but I would encourage you to take some college classes and get some college credit that's going to help support that idea. Like, for example, in our School of Business, we have incubators, we have pitch projects, we have money for social innovation. We have a bunch of different things to help entrepreneurs to get themselves together and get their feet up, feet wet and off the ground, so that their business can be successful. The other thing that I will tell you, only because Mesa did their Mesa Day and their speaker was amazing this past spring, actually before everything locked down. And she said something that I think is really important that I never think about as an entrepreneur, but it's that, essentially your businesses are going to fail, and that's part of the deal. And you need to learn from your failures. And then two, that you don't necessarily need to be in that business forever, right? You should be thinking about, how do I cultivate a business sell it, make enough resources to grow, cultivate the next business, right? So kind of always be thinking about what the next great idea is. And I thought that was awesome. This person who was speaking, for example, created the edible insect industry in America, as she said, which I was like, edible insects, never really thought about it. But apparently they're part of a lot of the things that we do. And she was able to really create that niche, sell it, and then kind of move on to the next thing. So I would say that for everyone, kind of thinking about that. And even if you look at your Steve Jobs and your Bill Gates types, they're creating something, selling that to some degree, and then trying to create the next great thing.
Thank you, Evan. I see Susan has her hand raised. Sorry, Jerry.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you, what advice would you give like to your high school self?
What
Besides,
advice would I give my high school self?
Yeah.
You know what? Get involved. Again, I played sports in high school, and I always thought it was kind of nerdy to get involved. And now as an adult, I realize that getting involved is not nerdy at all. And it's something that I should have been doing. So I think my big advice to my high school self would be get involved, listen to people who have done it before you, and just keep showing up, right? Like, even if you don't fully understand why you're showing up for something or why you're doing something, just keep doing it, because it'll start to reveal itself later, whether you realize it or not, right? Like, there are skills that, again, I went on the college tours at some point because they were fun, and I got to get away from home for a week during spring break, and it was cold during that time of the year in New York, and it was warm down south, and like, that was, I just showed up more for the fun of it. But in the process, I learned about college admissions. I learned about different colleges in different states. Like, I learned quickly that I didn't want to go to Atlanta. It was just too hot. Like, there was no way I was going to college in Atlanta after going on this college tour, right? I also, for example, there was a college, Bowie State University, that's in Maryland. And I'll never forget, the moment we got off the bus, they were like, "So y'all from New York?" And I was like, "Not going here." And so I think just showing up helps to kind of give you an idea of where you want to be. So I think that would be my biggest advice to you. So when opportunities come, when people are like, "Hey, why don't you come do this? Why don't you sit and do that?" I think I would say to you, do that. Because every time I did that as a young person, I think it really helped me. I'll say one other example. I spent a lot of time on college campuses. There was a program at the local state college that did a weekend, and it was the best experience ever. Like, I went on a Friday morning. We stayed Friday. We took classes. We got campus tours. And the best part about that for me was, my biggest fear for college was, like, I could never understand how people could sit in a class for 120 minutes, right? Like 2 hours or an hour and a half. I was like, no, my high school classes were like 35, 40 minutes, if that, you know what I mean? So my biggest fear was, like, how do people do that? Like, how do you sit in class like that? And to be able to sit there for an hour and 20 minutes as a high school student with other college students going to class, and just seeing how quickly that hour went and the interaction with the professor, that really helped me to feel comfortable that I was going to be okay in college. So again, just showing up.
A little follow-up. Yesterday we had this is a great conversation. I'm loving it, and I don't want to keep reflecting only, but you said something yesterday about showing up and being ready, and even if you don't know, and there's a little bit of fake it to make it, but the idea of not following through is the guarantee that you won't succeed.
Yeah, I really love being from New York. So let me just say there is a thing. We have the New York State Lotto. I'm sure other places have lottery. And their kind of tagline is, it's all about $1 and a dream, right? Like, so it's $1 and a dream. Sometimes you have to spend that $1 in hope, right? So you have to apply. You have to, 100% of the shots not taken never go in, right? Like, so you have to at least take the shot. If you don't take the shot, for me, I would rather you tell me no than I tell myself no, if that makes sense again, right? Like, so again, getting that confidence in us to say, you know what, I'm going to put my name in the hat. I'm going to put lay all my cards on the table, and whatever happens, happens. And it's not a reflection on me if I'm not accepted, right? Because there are so many factors, right, that we don't know about, that are seen or unseen, that prevent us from getting certain things, right? And then there are so many factors that just out of the blue, you get something and you're like, wow, I got it, right? So I always say, especially to students, don't self-select yourself out, right? Like, go ahead and put in the effort. I think the only caveat to that would be ROI, right? Return on investment. So if you say to yourself, what's the return on the investment of the effort that I'm going to put in for this thing, right? So a lot of times with scholarship applications, I say apply to every single scholarship application because, again, demystifying scholarships, a lot of people don't apply. So there are a lot of times when you see a scholarship and you're like, I'm sure 100 people are going to apply. I'm like, I only have a B, you know, a grade point average of about a B. And I'm not going to get it, so I'm not going to apply, right? The truth is, a lot of people do the same thing. So then the application, there's only 20, 30 people. So it wasn't as competitive as you assumed it would be. Not to say that you wouldn't compete in a competitive environment, but there was no point in kind of self-selecting yourself out before you had an opportunity to really compete, right? So I think that's part of showing up, right? It's not, regardless of where you are in your confidence, it's not self-selecting yourself out. It's pushing yourself enough to be like, let me just put it out there. Whatever happens, happens, you know? And again, if you don't get accepted, I kind of believe in the energy of the world and things happen. I'm a big fan of The Matrix. So you've seen the last one, there's an interaction with the Merovingian and they kind of get back in the elevator and there's concern and Morpheus turns and he said, you know, that happened exactly the way it was supposed to happen, right? And then they go down 2 more floors and the Merovingian's wife is like, here, let me help you do what you need to do, right? So as much as we think in the moment that certain things are supposed to happen a certain way, they're happening the way they're supposed to happen just based on the energy of the world. So you sometimes have to push that, but throw it out there.
Nice, nice. Earlier you said about people in business who leverage one risk. They sell lollipops so they can get T-shirts, right? Your junior achievement experience. How do you think that applies to you moving from your undergraduate degree into public planning? I mean, you took a pause, and the investment in yourself in going to college, then you settled, and then you made another investment. Is that part of that sequence there, or is that something different?
Yeah, I mean, every time I've ever gone back to college, except for undergrad, was because I wanted to pivot into a new career. And I thought that going to college would be the best way to do that because of the resources and the support systems and the knowledge that you gain in college, right? Like, so I wanted to be a planner, and I'm sure I probably could have taken a, civil service exam, apply to the planning office, and maybe eventually get in. But I thought by going to school, learning about planning, getting a stronger understanding about planning, getting some experience in planning would allow me to then have a better opportunity to, kind of get a planning job. So that kind of was my volition. And each time I go back to school for that reason. And I'm a lifetime learner. I like school. It's funnish. Yeah. Did I answer the question?
Yeah. You talked about your 12-year-old self knowing that you were going to go to college. I'm going to go out on a limb and bet that you didn't know you wanted to be a planner when you were 12.
Oh no, I didn't know.
And then so you sort of shaped yourself, right, by taking that first chance. And that first chance was an immersive experience, and the world changed and you changed, and then you took another chance. And so the idea that you have to know where you're going as you take your first step, that seems.
So I don't always think you need to know where you're going. I think, especially for undergrad, I think you need to go. I think you need to get on a campus. The only thing I would say is figure it out quickly, because the thing that we don't say enough about college, I think, is it's money. You have to think about the fact that the same way you would go buy a pair of sneakers and you put value into that and you have expectations for the amount that you spend for that and what you get back, education is much the same way, right? You're paying, in many cases, the most you've paid for anything in your life for this thing that they're giving you. So you need to make sure that you're doing the best with it, right? That said, at 17, 18, some cases 19 years old, going in as a first-time full-time freshman into college, you might not necessarily know what you want to do unless you've somehow been, I kind of joke that Obamacare is because Barack saw his mom sick and he was like, one day I'm going to be president of the United States and I'm going to make sure everyone has healthcare, right? Like, so it's that concept, right? If you have something that you're passionate about, you're going to walk into, wonderful, great, right? But if not, I think you need to go and you need to explore. You need to see what makes you happy. And I think spending about a year on campus doing that, spending about a year seeing what the different things that are available out there are, will, I think, prepare you for the next year. Because again, money is money. You don't want to spend 6 years in college because you're not, like, at a certain point you need to just get a degree and then work and then go from there, right? So for me, my degree was political science. The other thing I'll say about that too, I have a degree in political science. I wouldn't encourage any of you to get a degree in political science, unless, of course, you want to be a lawyer, unless you just have an easy route into like government and things like that, because what I'll say to you all, and this is just what I say to all my students, and I had to learn it late. You want to get a degree in something that I feel like has a job on the back end, unless you're just super passionate about something else and you're going to craft it out, right? So to me, jobs on the back end, engineers, doctors, lawyers, things that just have nutritionists, things that have a direct kind of, I started, I did the work, and now I am this thing. I think are great. Like, for example, I work in the School of Business, and our business degrees are wonderful, but outside of accounting and finance, you're going to have to put some meat on the bones of your degree, right? Which is fine, but you just have to know that going in. And putting meat on the bones, in my mind, is taking internships. It's meeting with professors. It's learning the different ins and outs. It's studying abroad. It's getting those pieces to make you a rounded person, because just a business degree, so just a marketing degree, doesn't necessarily mean anything other than you went to school and you completed. If you don't care about working in marketing, that's fine. But if you do care about working in marketing, then you need to make sure while you're in school that you're doing marketing internships, that you even look at your Instagrams, your Snapchats, your TikToks, and you think about, how am I getting more views? How am I getting more users, right? That is a degree of marketing. How do I then commodify that back out so that I can show to the world that I've been doing these sorts of things, right? Like, so that's a lot of words. I'm sorry, y'all.
No, this is good. It's good. We got some more
We-
questions too. Related, when did you figure out what you wanted your career to be? That's from Jules.
Man,
When did you figure it out?
I didn't figure
Before,
out
during, or after college?
after, at about age 26, I was working. I just got out of grad school, and I was working as a community organizer, and I'll never forget, I got in the car one day and I said to my brother, I was like, I hate my job. I don't know what I'm going to do, and I can't do this for the rest of my life. And my brother, being, you'd have to understand him, he's a very matter of fact and he's great. But he turns to me and he's like, so what did you love? Up to this point, what have you done that you loved? And I was like, no one really asked me that before. And I said, you know what? I loved college. I enjoyed every aspect of college, the ins and outs, the non-traditional schedules, the, going to class, the free time. Like, I loved college. He was like, well, if you love college so much, why don't you think about working for a college? And sure enough, I was like, yeah, it's a great idea. And I knew a guy that worked at the local college, so I emailed him. I said, hey, can I stop by? I'm really thinking about getting into higher ed. What would it take to get this done? And he's like, cool, come by. And he sat down and he showed me how he looked for jobs and all that sort of thing. And then, even with all that said, me getting into higher ed is just lucky. I went to a party. My friend invited me over on a random Tuesday, like, hey, I'm having some people over. Why don't you come? And I came, and this woman walked in. I was like, hey, how you doing? And she's like, hey, I work at the local college. I work in study abroad. I was like, study abroad, huh? I love to travel. I think I would be great in study abroad. And she kind of laughed. I was like, oh, I'll send you my resume tomorrow, blah, blah, blah. And sure enough, I sent her my resume and she was like, yeah, you can't work for me. But there is a position in the Multicultural Center, and based on the work that you've been doing and all that, I think you would be great at it, right? So again, it's the theme of my day, I guess. It's just showing up. Like, I showed up. I at least had the degree and had some credentials behind me. And I opened my mouth and I asked. And just from that, you know, I'm here 10 years later, 15 years later in Portland. And it's so funny, I drive around Portland every day. Like, once you get out of the city and you see the mountains and the lakes and the rivers and everything. And I just laugh to myself that, like, I'm not a sheltered person, but never in my wildest dreams did I think I would live in Oregon, right? Never in my life. The beauty that I see, all this, it's not for any other reason than it wasn't on my radar. So just showing up, doing some work, even not knowing what my actual career was going to be, and getting that master's and just kind of knowing I needed a master's, and picking urban planning, because again, my life has always been this situation where people, like, they put pressure on me and then I got to think about it, right? Like, so I was dating someone and it wasn't going well, and they lived in a beautiful city, and I was like, I'm going for a walk. And I walked around, and 3 hours later I said, I'm going to grad school for urban planning. I love cities. I love designing cities. I love the layouts. This is what I'm going to do. And sure enough, that's what I got a degree in.
Another question, not quite related, but similar about college. What were or was your dream college or colleges? You know, when you think about, oh, that would be so good, even now.
Oh, that's a great question. So my dream college to work at now, it's selfish, is I'll go to California just for this reason, but Pepperdine, because my understanding is it's right on the beach. And I can manage being on the beach every day, I think, for work, I believe. So I think that's the dream college for me to work at right now. But I think on another level, I'd love to work for like a big Division I school, because again, I love sports, and I just would love to be in that environment, right? During March Madness, or be on campus when a team's like playing for the national championship for football or something like that. I don't know. So I'm a big LSU fan, and my parents are from Louisiana, and my uncle lives in Baton Rouge. So I think I would love to work at LSU, or even go to LSU. Like, we have a legacy of HBCUs in our family, but I'm thinking that I want to start pushing daughter. Like, hey, why don't we go visit LSU? I know you're only 2, but let's go start looking. The tiger in there, we'll take some pictures and all the things. So I think my dream college now would be LSU.
Yeah, start with the swag and move up from there, right?
Yeah.
What? Just to let everyone know, what's an HBCU?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I know. Yeah. No, but it's an important idea.
So HBCU just stands for Historically Black College and University.
And for that, and you said that was part of your family legacy, so there was a sort of like a knowledge about that. You had some history there that way.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, just the history of America is kind of the history of us sometimes too. So for a long time, like, my parents I'm old, and they're old enough to have been able to have lived during a time where they couldn't have gone to, a majority institution. So they had to go to a quote unquote segregated institution. And again, it's just lucky, you know. My dad's mom, I think, was like a maid, if I remember, and she met her husband, my dad's father, on a train because he was a porter, as she was just kind of going somewhere, and just randomly, she was going to school. She was actually, I think, studying for school when she met, I guess, my grandfather, and she stopped going to school so she could help him. And so my dad ended up going to college, and my mom, and actually everyone from her side, went to college. And I just kind of knew. I knew I wasn't going to the colleges that they went to. My dad went to Alabama A&M, and my mom went to Southern in Louisiana. And I was like, I'm not going that far south. The South is the South. So yeah.
What do you say to students who come to you in your current role? What kind of conversations do you have? What are their concerns? What's up? What's up with folks that you work with?
Yeah, I think the biggest issue that I see with my students right now is, again, confidence and really feeling like this thing. Are you guys familiar with the concept of imposter syndrome? A little bit? Okay. So essentially, imposter syndrome basically means, like, even for me, it's like, for example, someone's like, oh, you should be a chief diversity officer. And I'm like, no, I don't think so. But the truth is, I think that's the imposter syndrome in me, because I have experience, I have knowledge, I have background that would probably make me a decent chief diversity officer, maybe. But my lack of self-confidence and self-esteem and my skills and my ability to feel like, oh, I should be there, kind of holds me back from kind of leaning into that. So a lot of the conversations that I have with my students are like, I'm first generation college students. You know, my parents don't speak English. How can I possibly work at a Nike, or how could I possibly be an account executive for an Adidas? So it's a lot of helping them understand that, right? I have a Native American student who does social media, super low self-esteem, super low. So we're talking and I'm like, hey, and they're like, well, I don't really know. And I said, well, what are you doing now? And they're like, oh, well, I do say, social media for the Native American Center. I do my own little social thing and this and that. And I'm like, okay, so you have the skills. And she's like, well, I guess, you know? So a lot of our conversation is kind of helping her see that. I encourage her to apply to a job in our office or in the School of Business. She's now one of the best kind of social media folks we've had in that role. And countless people come back and they're like, so-and-so is amazing, so-and-so is amazing. And I'm like, wow, if you guys only knew what it took to kind of motivate them into actually applying. So a lot of that is that. A lot of our other conversations are just barriers, right? Like talking about actual barriers. You know, do I want to leave my family at home to go take a job in California? You know, how do I make sure that my marketing degree, you know, translates into a job? Conversations around where do I look for a job, right? Like, how do I feel comfortable in that environment? How do I prepare for an interview, right? Like, it's something that simple. So we do a lot of mock interviewing. We do a lot of work with resumes, again, because we want confidence. We want to do all the things to help you fake your confidence or have genuine confidence.
Great. I'm reminded that you might have another commitment, so I don't want to keep.
I mean,
we'll keep you here. We'll keep you here, but
do you have more questions in the chat?
I am bad at multitasking. If anyone's if I missed a question, please let me know. And here's your chance out there, folks.
Last chance for one more question.
What from Jules? What did you do to apply for college? Is this Jules, a question about the mechanism? Like, how do you actually do the application, or was there some other like personal step you had to do?
Well, I'm sorry, that's the first part. I was reading Sandy's comment about Pepperdine. Cindy, sorry.
Yeah, so my question was actually back to Jules. So Jules asks, what did you do to apply for college? So I'm not, what did you have to do? What were the steps? Or was that like, what did you have to personally overcome in yourself to make that commitment?
So again, and I know how this sounds, but you all are going to have to motivate yourselves to do that first applying piece, right? You're going to have to figure out where you think you want to go. You have to figure out what the requirements to go there are, and then you just have to apply. Because the truth of the matter was, for me, I kind of was like, I came home and my mom's like, where do you want to go to college? And I was like, I don't know. She's like, well, come back to me in a week with some schools that you're interested in. And again, old school, like we had to get paper applications, and I think you had to go to the library, and like it was a whole thing. And luckily, my mom did all my applications. I'm sorry, I'm that spoiled kid. I apologize. I know how it sounds. But for you all, you have to do the same thing in a lot of ways, which is, one, figure out where you want to go. So I would probably start with, either your mentors that are a part of this program, or depending on how good your school's career and guidance counselors are, going to them. The other thing in my school, which I really thought was interesting in our high school, and looking back, it's probably not the best thing to do because not everybody's going to college, but like they had this wall, right, that had like your name and where you had been accepted to, and like you wanted to be on the wall. It just, you didn't want to not be on the wall. So there was some kind of motivation in that. So I would say going back to your career counselors and talking to them. In many cases, they've been to different colleges in the state of Oregon, and then other colleges that are not in the state. I mean, I will say to you all that I was a person who wasn't going to stay in state. I needed to get out of the state. That's what I needed. But some of you may feel the same way. And if you feel that way, then I would say start looking for it now. Start figuring out what schools are out of the state that you can apply to, and start figuring out what money is available to go to those schools, right? Because you're going to have money for it, but apply, because once you get in, you don't have to go anywhere, right? Like I used to talk to students that had 4 colleges. I'm like, why'd you come to this one? They're like, well, this is the one that gave me the most money, right? So you can apply to multiple colleges and then decide later, kind of based on that. What's great, because we're in a pandemic, is everything should probably be remote. There should be some good like online tours and things. I mean, the one thing I will say too is make sure you see yourself at the college campus. If the college is not aware enough to have pictures of people who look like you and come from backgrounds that you come from, it's probably not going to be a great indication of how comfortable you feel when you get there, right? So look at the websites, right? Don't do anything sight unseen. Like I moved to Oregon sight unseen. I came one day to find an apartment. I went back to DC, grabbed all my stuff, and I came. You know what I mean? Don't do that. Don't do that for college. Make sure you at least look at the website. You don't have to necessarily put boots on the ground, but you need to look at the website. You need to see if it has the values that you have. Like, not for nothing, you're growing up in, I think, one of the most interesting places in the country, right? Like Oregon's progressive speak and openness and like across the board makes you all different types of people, right? Like whether you realize it or not, because of the way you've been trained. So you have to make sure you're going to be in an environment that's going to nurture that, right? You have to make sure you're going to go to a college that when you're like talking about environmental issues that you've probably been talking about since you were in elementary school, there may be a chance that other people don't get that. You need to make sure you have a space and that professor or that classroom or that college is conducive to that, even if you're helping to educate people. So I think it's really important as you start to look is that you look for things that make sense and that you can afford, right? Like, so apply for the most prestigious college you want to go to. But at the end of the day, a college degree is a college degree. You can use that anywhere in the country. As long as it's accredited, an accredited university, it doesn't matter if you go to U of O, Portland State, Reed, Cal Berkeley, OHSU, NYU, it doesn't really matter. I think, let's say you know you're going to live and work in Oregon for the rest of your life. People in Oregon seem to be really high on U of O. So maybe you say, I want to go to U of O because I know I'm going to live in Oregon and that U of O title is going to get me more entree. Think of it like that, right? That makes sense to me. But my whole point is you should be thinking about it as you're applying, like what makes sense? What do I think I'm going to do? Am I going to stay here? Am I not going to stay here? What size college is going to work for me? Like that was the benefit of the college tours for me. The school that I ultimately went to, I think has a population of like 8,000 or 9,000. So it was small. So do you want to be in a small school? Do you want to kind of know everybody? Do you want everyone to know you? Or do you want to be at a huge institution? Like even PSU is pretty big, but like a big institution like U of O or OSU, do you want to be just a number on those campuses? Do you want, like PSU again, do you want to be in a traditional residential space, or understanding that PSU is more of a commuter kind of space? There are dorms. So I think part of like how you apply or where you should apply, you have to start taking into factors of what you like, what you want, and what you think you need for the next phase of your life. Because in the degree program, if you have any idea of the degree program, like you might say, I want to do sustainability and environmental design or something, right? Like you need to make sure someone's got that sort of degree program. And if that's something you love and you're passionate about, I might even push on you to say, find the best school for it in the country and apply to that one. And then the second best, and then maybe the third best. And then whoever gives you the most money, you go to that one, right? That's if you know what you want to do.
Great. Another question related to choosing schools or being in schools. Going into an out-of-state school, what was the most difficult part in getting used to living in a new setting?
Culture and accents. I went to school down south. Context, I went to school, for anyone who understands the Civil War, I went to school in the town where the treaty to end the Civil War was signed. So there were Civil War battlefields down the street that people would like come visit, which was really interesting. And I'm like, you really want to just go see a battlefield? It's not Arlington or like or one of these or Gettysburg. It's a battlefield in Petersburg, Virginia. So how do I say that? So yeah, again, I think the culture, just learning that like, and for example, like I know how Oregonians kind of treat folks from California. This is the first time in my life that I've come to a state and I'm like, oh, I'm from New York, and no one had any baggage. Whereas, no one's ever there. Oh, okay. Whereas when you leave New York State on the East Coast, as soon as you tell someone you're from New York or you show a New York license, there's just a, and it's like, wait, I'm not even from that part of the city. It's not where I'm from. But people have this kind of like, so for me, it was like understanding that I just did things differently, right? Like I was moving a lot faster than other people, and I had to learn how to kind of slow down and accept the fact that just because the way we do it in New York is not the way they do it in Virginia, doesn't mean that Virginia is bad for doing it Virginia's way. It's more of learning Virginia's way, right? Like, and I would say that that is the best lesson taught across the board for me. You shouldn't automatically bring your culture into a new space. You should take a moment to sit back and understand the culture of the new space, right? Like, realizing that you're not from this place. And although the rules and the mores of the place that you're from are such that there are new ones here, and you have to learn that, right? Like, so even for me in Oregon, like, I'm sorry, but Oregonians are not very direct. It's just not really a thing that you guys do. You kind of deal in passive aggression and around the table. And whereas kind of in New York, it's like, listen, that wasn't a really great paper. I'm gonna show you how we can make it better, but like, it's not the whole sandwich. Like, you know what, you did a really good job with this. I really like the ideas, and let's just kind of tweak this little part, and I know it's gonna be great. Like, I think sometimes that happens, but a lot of times it's just like, I don't have time for that. Like, it's something you guys probably don't know, but that I learned here is like meetings. You don't start the meeting until after everyone does like a check-in, right? It's like, so how was your weekend? How are you feeling about such and such, such and such? So that's a 5-10 minute kind of chit chat. And then you get into the bulk of the meeting. Whereas like where I come from, the meeting starts and we might do a quick round of introductions, and then you're just into the business. After the meeting, if you know certain people, you might ask them how things are going because you haven't seen them in a while. So I say all that to say it's just learning and adjusting. Like, you can still be you, but you have to be mindful of the environment. And once I learned that, I've taken that. I studied abroad in Cuba. I had no problems because I got there and I was like, okay, this is the culture. Got you. I can deal with that. You know, and everywhere I've gone, I think I've been ingratiated into the community because I've always been authentically me, but I've also been able to absorb the environment and really, I think, function within that environment. And I would argue, just on a global level, this is me being political and personal, but I think we need a little bit more of that in our country and in our world, right? We need a little bit more of people being like, okay, as opposed to me knowing everything, coming in and hearing what I need to learn to function in this space, and then kind of adjusting my baggage from there. But yeah, so that was a challenge.
It's good words. Lots of good words. Well, I want to thank you for sharing this time and bringing yourself here so we can see your story and learn from that. I think there's going to be a lot of ripples from this conversation that are going to keep spreading through the camp. So I want to thank you for being the source of that. And yeah, love to have you drop in again. Maybe we chat some more. But thank you for today. It's been really wonderful.
Thank you all
Bravo.
for having me. Thank you for listening. I really, really
Bravo.
appreciate it. And I'm available if you guys want or need anything from me at any time. Folks have my contact information. So if you have follow-up questions, concerns, or just want to chat, feel free to drop me an email and we can kind of, touch bases and go from there. Anyone, I will say that I'm not sure the age level totally, but anyone who's a senior and maybe starting at PSU in the fall and is studying business, I'm in the School of Business. We run a program called Atmos, so please check us out. Again, a lot of the supports that I kind of talked about, we provide to our students. We're a team of 3, but we're mighty, and just so you can kind of have that sense of place and connection with the School of Business as well as PSU, and start to kind of network and all that kind of stuff. I think get connected. And I would say globally, any campus that you go to, there are people who do the type of work that I do in the School of Business, and people that work for the student success centers and all that kind of stuff. My last advice to you is get connected with one of those folks. Identify based on what you feel most passionate about, whether it's, race and ethnicity, whether it's degree, whether it's, career goals, whether it's even just hobbies, like PSU has an outdoor program. If you love to get out and hike, find the outdoor program on your campus that allows you to do that so you can connect with other people, be it intramural sports, whatever it is, get connected, because each campus has people who do this type of work, whether it's U of O, PSU, Stanford, Brown, it doesn't matter, right? So thank you.
Yeah, you don't have to figure it out yourself. Just ask.
Right.
Show up.
There's nothing wrong with asking.
Show up and ask. Bravo. Thanks so much. We'll
Bye,
see you
guys.
again.
Thank you, Evan. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.